Hi again, everybody. Thank you for your patience and for standing by. We just had a little technical difficulties. As much as doing stuff live is a super awesome technology, these things happen. So thanks for your patience. So the same things that I'm going to look at to draw these animals, I'm actually going to be looking at those for when I want to identify them. If I were in the Caribbean scuba diving right now, or if I were a coral reef ecologist. So I like to look at things like body shape, fins or limbs, because we're going to be drawing some fish today, but we're also going to be drawing a reptile. You might be able to guess, if you know the aquarium, which reptile I'm excited about drawing. Mouth and mouth shape can tell us a lot about what the animal eats. Eyes are important just because as humans, we a lot of times look to eyes to kind of identify or like share. We're like, oh, okay, like I see that thing's face. And if you think about this, you do it all the time. Like we use faces to read how something's feeling or thinking. And it's a little tricky with doing that with animals because I do a cartoonify and personify them a bit. Patterns can help us identify an animal. And I'm just going to be doing black and white today, but color is another thing that also helps us identify animals and draw them. And this is the weird one. This is behavior. And we're not going to get this from the still photos, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience seeing these animals in the wild or at the aquarium, and you'll see how that kind of affects my drawing. So the first animal we're going to start with, I like to start small, is a blue chromis. And so I'm going to, at home, I have my book open right here. The first thing I'm going to look at is my blue chromis body shape. And actually in the guidebook, they're listed under small ovals. So I think that's probably a pretty good place to start. So I'm just going to do a small oval. And my drawings are going to be a little wiggly. It's a little hard to draw digitally, but that's okay. And a lot of times I'll put little guidelines on my thing, and that just gives me the center and kind of the different quadrants. So blue crevices have pretty big eyes. And I know I'm skipping ahead to eyes, but I just want to leave that in. And they have a pretty small mouth. Now, I'll talk about their mouth in a second, but let's go back to their fins. So they have one that kind of goes along their back and ends there. And I try to break down shapes into like circle, oval, triangles. So in this case, they've got kind of like a long, thin, like pointy triangle. And one of the cool things about shape, especially in bodies and in fins and fish, is they can give you a clue as to what that animal might swim like. So I have a feeling the Brucomus, I know it's small, so it probably doesn't swim big distances, but I bet in the small area that it lives, it can actually be pretty fast if it needs to. So let's take a look at that back tail. You get a little chunk right there. The back tail is shaped like a V, like the letter V. And a lot of times a V-shaped tail means I'm a pretty fast swimmer. And I don't think we're going to be doing any paddle-shaped tails, but if you have a fish that's shaped like a fish tail that's shaped like a paddle, a lot of times they're really good at turning their body around, but they're not the fastest. So think about like a puffer fish. Not a fast one, but they can actually do like a full like body turn, which is pretty neat. And I noticed that on the chromis, the tail's kind of pointed at the end. So I'm kind of focusing on those points. And I'm going to go back in. And again, I think of describing the shape. So like a V shape or a C shape, triangles, points. And let's see. I think we've got a pectoral fin on the side. Those are these ones, or the ones that are like extending from the side, pectoral fins. So a little tiny one there. Don't want to forget those gills. Those are important for breathing. And I want to go back to the mouth. So chromises are pretty small fish, not that big. And they will sometimes live roughly in groups. So maybe not like a big school, but they'll live together. And they're plankton feeders. So they're eating pretty tiny stuff. So when we look at this chromis's mouth, got a pretty tiny little mouth on here for a chromis. And do we think this chromis needs some food? I think it does. So let's draw a little tiny plankton. And then we can go in and give that chromis an eye. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase some of my guidelines that I drew from a fishy. And one of the things about chromises is that when I was first learning about these fish and identifying them, I was actually on a dive trip, and I thought they were pronounced chromies. So I called them chromies all the time, and nobody wanted to correct me because they thought it was silly. They're like, oh, she says chromies. So I don't get too caught up on pronouncing words correctly. I try when I can, but especially for scientific words, I don't have a scientific background. I actually have a background in art. So a lot of it is kind of the learning process for me. And I think it's okay to totally get into the words, but it's also okay to mess up and not pronounce stuff right, especially when it comes to names for fish. And you'll notice up in the top corner, I have the common name, which is blue chromis, and then below it is the scientific name. So chromis is the genus, and cyana, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, is the species. And I like to put that on there just because there might be some scientists watching today that might be interested in learning a little bit more, or some people who just are into stuff. So patterns. Blue chromis has kind of like a dark top on there. And then scales. So scales is another thing to look at, and that can be a pretty good indicator. So I'm just going to do a bunch of little C. It's almost like you're making a backwards D and not doing the line, or a bunch of C shapes, just for funsies. And since I cartoon, I do a lot of things with motion lines. So maybe this chromis came in really fast and it's swimming to catch this plankton. Or maybe it's just floating there and it's hiding behind a rock, and the plankton, I mean, the plankton probably doesn't care that much, but the plankton can't see it. So maybe we'll just have little subtle motion lines. Oh, and I might have forgotten, did I forget a little fin down the bottom? Sometimes there's another fin down here. I think that one might be in there. So start to finish, that's a chromis. You can do even faster ones that are more cartoony. And one of the things that I think about is like distilling something down to its most basic form. So that's kind of like your classic fish, right? The shape that I just drew down below. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Boop. And maybe this one will be very excited. And again, one of the things that I do is my drawings aren't super scientific. I try and make them as honest a portrayal of the animal I'm drawing with still making it cartoony. And that's a tightrope that I like to walk with the comics that I do. Because I think there's something to be said for engaging people who are looking at the drawings. And I think you want to look at something that's fun or engaging or that grabbed your attention. But at the same time, I really love sharing scientific facts. So if I can have the chromis doing something like that's more like its behavior. Oh, one of the other behavior things I forgot about is that a lot of animals in the ocean, and just like, you know, animals in general, are often protective of their young. So chromises can get very defensive of their egg masses. So I think the last one before we move to the next one should be an angry chromis, and maybe not angry, but a defensive chromis. Like, I must protect my eggs. And it's hard for me to not like do little fish voices for them because, you know, let me just scoot these ones aside. And I will say the program that I'm working in today is Photoshop. It's the program I've been working in to color comics for a long time. But the comics that I draw, I actually draw on paper and ink on paper, and I just use Photoshop to color and sometimes do layouts. So, let's see. Angry chromis. Maybe we'll challenge ourselves. And I know we don't have a photo of this, but let's think about what this chromis might look like if we were staring straight at it. And this is where fish are funny, because if you've looked at a fish on the side and then you look at it like that, it changes a lot. So let's see if we can use our brains to be like, what if I took this chromis and turned it sideways? And this is something that's a little tricky to do. And in this case, especially if I'm drawing the same character over and over again, where did you go? Oh, here we go. I actually use a lot of toys. There's some really good plastic toy companies that make pretty great replicas of animals. And that way, so this is a blue shark. That way, if I wanted to draw the shark from the front, from the side, or maybe I'm below it, I can move it and use that as a reference to draw. And a lot of times people are like, oh, you shouldn't use references, you should only use your imagination. Use as many references as you can to help make the drawing that you want. You shouldn't trace photos, but you can definitely use photos and toys to really help you capture what something looks like. And that's not cheating. It's just part of, especially when you're working with scientific comics or nonfiction comics. So let's go back to our angry chromis. Something I was going to say is that I will be able to take questions, and I haven't done this yet. If there's anybody who has a question while I'm drawing, please feel free to ask. I know that the aquarium has a moderator, and they can get to me. You can also save your questions to the end, but if anybody has any questions about what I'm drawing or about being a comic artist or about my background, please feel free to ask, and they'll get to me. So let's do our angry chromis. And that doesn't look too angry. I know fish don't have eyebrows per se, but I think we need some eyebrows. And I think the mouth would maybe look like that. Maybe we'll get some gills on the side. And maybe this fish needs to be saying, I'm going to draw on the background a little egg mass. Just draw some little fishy eggs back there. And I think we need a don't touch my eggs or else. And one of the things that I really like about the science comics I do is that I'm always looking for stories that I can have an animal tell you. Because as much as I love hearing, and I do love hearing people share stories about animals, I like to think about what it must be like inside their head and to give animals or things that don't have a voice so that they can tell you a little bit about their life. And it's me using a little bit of fiction to share nonfiction. But I think it's a really engaging way to tell a story. And for me, it's kind of the way that I process the world. I love cartoons and I love comics, so I can't not think of the world in this way. Like I always am doing like inner monologues for even nature I see out on my walks. Like if I see some birds and I'm always like the robin's looking for the worm, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a good worm. Oh, I got the best worm. Like I can't not do that. So, okay, here are our chromases. And I think we're ready to move on to the next animal. So I'm going to make the chromases go away. And we're gonna do a cownose ray next. So cownose rays are cartilaginous fish. That means they have a skeleton made of cartilage. So it's like similar to having a skeleton of it reflexible like your nose or your ears, or even in between your joints, there's cartilage. And I chose the cownose ray because body shape in the ocean can be very, very diverse. It can be really interesting. So I like to call rays that look like cow noses raviolis. And then I call like flat rays or round rays pancakes. So today we're going to do a pancake ray. And cow noses, they're great. So body shape, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Body shape. We have, if you know what the shape is, just shout it out. A rhombus. Oh, sorry, it was a triangle first, but it's two triangles stuck together and it's a rhombus. And there's pointiness at the tips, because those are the little wing tips. And cow nose rays can get to be up to, I think it's 45 inches across from wingtip to wingtip. So it's pretty good. I want to draw the bottom of the cownose ray first. So on the bottom, and I think you can see it in the picture, we've got this wonderful little smile. And it's tricky because it looks like a smile to us, but it's the way that their mouth is shaped. And that's because behind their mouth, they've got these flat teeth that are used for crushing things that might be in the sand that have a hard shell. So oysters, clams, crabs, anything that has a hard shell and like a nice juicy inside, that's where they're going to be using their teeth inside to crush. And again, they don't have sharp teeth. They have like flat, I think of a good description. They're basically just like flat plates for teeth that they can crush shells in. And they also have gill slits. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on one side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want to go back a little bit to the nosy part. Now they get their name cow nose, and it's kind of shaped a little bit like a heart or like a really stretched out letter B. And that's because they've got these special sensory flaps on the top that they can push down and kind of move around and touch in the sand. So if you think about an animal that lives in the ocean, they don't have hands for touching. And that's a lot of times what we rely on. So cownose rays and a lot of other fish have different parts of their bodies that they use instead of hands for touching and exploring places. And for a lot of these animals, that's their mouth. They explore the ocean with their mouth. And that's kind of just the easiest way for them to do it. If I want to try, I mean, it'd be funny for us to do it because I'd be like, oh, can I eat this? No, I can't. That's kind of like me being an ocean animal. So sorry, back to the ray. They've got some fins in the back. I can't remember what these ones are called. Apologies. And then they have their tail. And this tail part is not their stinger. We're doing the bottom part. I'll show you where their stinger is on the top when we're going to switch it around. And I'm not sure if we can really see their eyes super well. Maybe you can. Maybe we can fudge it a little bit. And I give them like little tiny dots for eyes. And so we've got that. And flappy. So these guys fly kind of like that. So what I might do is maybe do some motion lines around that part. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, or not cheat a little bit, but to draw another ray, and this is how I like to draw them, I'm actually going to shrink this friend a little bit. A little smaller. Go up there. Okay, there you go, buddy. And then I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to use the same drawing that I just did to do the top part. So, because they look pretty similar on the top and on the bottom. So, let's get rid of that. Actually, you know what? We keep the eyes. But on the top of their body, they're domed a little bit on top. So that means that if you looked at one coming at you, they would be shaped, this part would be kind of like a hump. So I wanted to have some kind of indicator. And then right here, that part leads into there, and their fins kind of stay on the bottom part of them. And then on the top, they would have a little barb. And the barb is used for defense, just in case they need to defend themselves against a predator. It's like a last ditch resort. Most animals, if they're scared of something, most animals that live in the ocean, what do you think the first thing they're going to do is? What's one of the things they're best at? They're going to swim away. So a lot of the animals that have extra methods of protecting themselves, it's just like a last minute thing, because for the ray to use its barb would actually probably put it in harm. It might hurt them as well. So they're usually going to swim away. And if there's anybody here that's been to tropical places that have rays in them, there's something that is a safe thing to do if you're walking on the beach there, and you do the stingray shuffle, and you shuffle your feet so you don't accidentally step on one. And that's just good practice, because when we go into the ocean, we're guests in that place. We're not owners of the ocean, we're guests in that habitat. So I like to try and educate myself as best as I can so that I can be a good guest in the ocean and kind of respect the animals that live there. Now, I believe that the rays that live in the aquarium get their barbs clipped, and it doesn't hurt. It's kind of like getting your fingernails clipped, and that's just to ensure the safety of the folks that take care of them. And it's also good for the rays too, because they also get things like physical exams, and it's good for them to, have a little bit of time with people, because that's one of the ways that humans can take care of animals that are living in aquariums or zoos, is to give them physical examinations and make sure that they're healthy and everything. And that extends to science as well. There's a lot of stuff we've learned about animals that live in zoos and aquariums that would otherwise be really hard to learn in the wild, just because you can have a closer relationship with those animals. So maybe we'll do a little one from the front. I think I'm doing okay on time, but I want to try and imagine what a ray would look like from the front. And again, I have to use my imagination for this part, just by thinking about what rays look like before. And I'm thinking about when I've seen them at the touch tank in the aquarium. There's a touch tank that has a lot of cow-nose rays in it, and they like to school. You generally will see cow-nose rays together in a pretty big group, all hanging out together. So I'm trying to think of what their face, they kind of look like they have almost like a little kitty, like a kitty face. And those are the flaps that I was telling you about. They've got the sensory flaps that they can kind of push down. And then their eyes be on the side, and then kind of a little hump part for their nose. And then you might not actually see the tail if they're swimming right at you, but let's make this one a little dynamic and think about where the tail might come out from the side. And do some little flappies. And maybe this one's swimming really close to the bottom. And I think it's getting close to lunchtime. I think we'll give this ray a little lunch. So how about a lovely little clam for this friend to snack on? Just hanging out there. And then that ray can now look at. Maybe we should make it going, ooh, delicious. Oh, I love using these little lines. Sometimes they're like little think lines. So yeah, cow-nose rays. Is there any questions that anybody's had so far that have come in?
I have a couple, if you want to take a break for a few.
Yeah, I can.
So we had our first question from Joanna, asked, are you drawing with a tablet?
I am drawing with a tablet, so I can hold that up. This is a Wacom tablet. I think you can see it. This is the student grade tablet. I think it goes for about $100. It comes with a stylus, and sorry, it's a little slippery, probably from that time that I put it in my mouth. When I draw on it, it acts just like a mouse. So I'm making contact with the tablet, but on my screen, the lines are showing up. I have been tinkering around lately with drawing on an iPad, and in that case, I'm actually drawing with a stylus onto the screen, so it's a little bit more like drawing on paper. They're kind of like fun tools for me to play with, but they're by no means required. I've been using a Wacom tablet like this, I've gone through, this is my third one in 20 years, but they last for a pretty long time. They're pretty durable. And as far as equipment goes, they're not too prohibitive. There's all different kind of pay amounts for electronic drawing stuff. But yeah, and I just, it's what I've drawn with for so long, so it's what I'm used to.
Great. I think we have one more from Kara, who asked, how do you draw a hammerhead shark / what is your favorite shark to draw?
Oh, I was gonna do a bonnet head today, but we might save that for another one. So hammerhead sharks are really hard to draw, I think, because they already, I don't want to say they look strange, because to a hammerhead, that's just what they look like. But because they have such a fantastic cephalofoil, that part on the top of their head that's sensory to search for food, it's very different because it doesn't look like a lot of faces we're used to. So I can do it. You know what? I'll do a little quick hammerhead up in the top. Let's do it on the Counos one. And one of the things that come on, there we go. One of the things that I'll do is I start with a basic shark shape, and then I just throw that on there, and I'm going to do it from below. And again, a lot of what I do, the reason why I look at them a lot too. So a lot of times if I'm challenged by an animal that looks strange or that I really need to pay attention to, I will, it's a little unhappy friend. And then it's hard because a lot of times you wouldn't actually see both their eyes in one picture, but for cartooning, I might do that. I feel like we should make this friend a little happier. But my favorite shark, it's like asking me to pick my favorite kid. I don't have any kids, but like it's a tricky question. I will say, one of the first sharks I got to know pretty well were nurse sharks. And I think I like any kind of animals that are kind of like chill and stick to the bottom. And the reason why I like nurse sharks is because they're one of the first sharks I ever saw diving. But they have these cute little barbels, like these little whiskers. And again, it's another characteristic they have that's sensory that can help them find food. So I think a lot of times if an animal has a really unique feature that also helps them survive in their habitat, I get excited about it. One of my favorite fish in the giant ocean tank is the black drum, and he's got like a full little beard of barbels. And again, they're just like little sensory pieces of his body that helps him sense movement in the water. And movement in the water is good because usually if something's moving nearby, it might be worth eating. So we'll change this friend to have a little happy face. And yeah, so it's a lot of it's just looking and practicing and playing. And like I said, for every drawing that you see me doing here, I've practiced drawing hammerheads and cownos. I've probably drawn thousands and thousands of these animals just in my sketchbooks and books in general. So that's, yeah, so a little hammerhead friend. So yeah, let's move to the parrotfish. Now, I want to do a parrotfish because they're another one of my favorite reef fishes. I feel like they're kind of a fish that a lot of people know about. And I have the image that's popped up for parrotfish is a midnight parrotfish. So this is one of the many types of parrotfish you'll find in the giant ocean tank. And also, seeing them diving is really fun too. Actually, it was a regular day dive, but I looked under a ledge and there was this huge parrotfish that was like, "Oh, hello." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb your nap, sir." But I love when you, again, like being respectful when diving or even just like snorkeling or tide pooling. It's really fun when you kind of get to like see an animal just doing their thing. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean to disturb you, but I'm really glad I saw you. So parrotfish, body shape. And I have my parrotfish open. I'm using I'll show you my book because I actually can't see the screen that you all see, but I've got it open to the parrotfish page as well. So that's why if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my parrotfish. So they've got a bit more of it's like a stretched out oval. It's not quite a torpedo shaped body like an animal like a barracuda or a needlefish. Let's start with a pretty good size oval. And I'll do my cross again, just because I like to do that just to help. And fins. So they've got a pretty funky tail. They've got kind of like streamers on the back. So think about kind of like a big letter D. I think we need a little bit more meaty part at the caudal peduncle, one of my favorite science words. This is called the caudal peduncle. It's a fancy name for where the tail meets the body. A peduncle is just a name for that joint, but it's like the best name, caudal peduncle. So it's kind of like you're making a really fancy D on the back there for their tail. And we've got some rays coming off there. This should do the tail. Here, I'll clean that up a little bit. And this, based on that tail, I'd say this fish probably can swim pretty fast, but can also maneuver itself pretty well. And I feel like because it's got a little bit of a paddle, but it's also got that V shape. So I feel like, and so I'm also saying this a little bit from experience because I've seen them swim. But there's some clues that we can use. So let's look at some other fins. We've got kind of that top dorsal fin that extends. And this is another one that's just kind of like a long, kind of pointy triangle, and it kind of tapers at the back there. And then it looks like we got a little bit similar thing going on the bottom, just a little bit less. And one of the things that I will do as an artist is when I'm drawing something, I'll use reference points. So part of the reason why I draw that cross is because I can look at my image and be like, okay, this bottom tail comes before the bottom part, but the bottom fin, the top one actually comes ahead of it. So it just gives me a point of reference to like look on that fish. Okay. Oh, we've got some pretty good fins on the bottom. And then let's get our gill slit, the operculum there. And I feel like they've got pretty muscular like side fins, those pectoral fins. So let's give this guy this friend. Get some rays coming out from there. Not cow nose rays, just rays. And then I want to look at the face. So one of the cool things about parrotfish is that they have a beak. They have a very sharp mouth that's shaped pretty much like a bird beak, and they're really good at chomping on things. A lot of parrotfish like to scrape algae off of rocks and sometimes coral in the reef. There's actually some species of parrotfish that will actually munch on the coral itself. And coral has a pretty hard skeleton, like a bottom. It's got like almost a shell. So when the hard parts of the coral pass through the parrotfish's body, it actually gets turned into nutrient-rich sand that the parrotfish then poops out, which I think is kind of a cool thing because we think about animals eating other animals. And it's like, oh, they're eating the coral. Isn't that bad? I'm like, no, it's actually part of this like big connected story of how the reef survives and how each animal is an individual player in making the reef a habitat. So that's one of the interesting things about ecology and studying a whole habitat or a whole environment is being able to see the interactions and the relationships of the animals with each other and how the, I got my pen color changed a little bit. Hold on one second. I'm gonna use the eyedropper. Eyedropper. Boop. So let's get that beak in there. So I in the picture, they don't look as smiley, but I kind of just like making my fish smile because, and you'll notice I was a lot looser on some of the other parts, but with the beak, I might pay very close attention to the shape that it makes. So cartooning animals is a little bit of caricature where you pick the features that are the most pronounced or sometimes even the most important features. And that's why you'll see a lot of people just like draw sharks or be like teeth everywhere. But like sometimes if you see sharks in real life, you don't see their teeth. Most of it is their body or the way that they swim. And there's nothing wrong with making teethy sharks too. If you want to make like teeth for days, that's fine. But a lot of what I do is a little bit of caricature. So thinking about like what are the most distinguishing features. And again, that's the same type of skills that I would use if I were in a reef right now and doing a reef survey, like counting and identifying species. And that's one of my other favorite parts is even though I'm not a scientist by trade, there's a lot of really cool citizen science stuff that you all can do to participate in your local habitats, whether it's a backyard bird count or tide pooling and doing like a like coastal critter survey. And I think that's a really fun way to learn to identify different animals, but then also share that data with a large group of people. And scientists can actually use that data to learn about habitats. So right now I've been doing a lot of backyard identification stuff. I live outside of Boston. I don't have a very big backyard, but there's a lot of birds. So I'm out there with my binoculars just because like many of you, a lot of us have been staying at home and staying really local for the past couple months. So I am always trying to find ways to do science even within my own home or within my own like little neighborhood. It doesn't always have to be going to the beach. So their eyes are set a little further back on their head. So I'm going to just draw a little parrotfish eye in there. And I think this friend is a little hungry. So I know again, I keep saying it's lunchtime. Let's feed these friends. And we'll do a little bit of coral, but I think what this guy is maybe interested in is like a little bit of algae. It's like, I really like to eat my greens because they're good for me. And if I have a little bit of coral when I get the coral poops, that's okay too. Because coral poops are totally healthy for the sand. Yes, that's right. I just drew a little poop, and it happens. It happens. So who says you can't poop and eat at the same time? This parrotfish definitely says that. Oh, and scales. Parrotfish have these really beautiful, like big, like wide C-shaped tails. Scales. And they're a fish that I kind of think of as like a classic. Like if you were to draw a cartoon of a fish, they kind of have the cartoony scales. One thing that I will mention is there are some other species of parrotfish, like the queen parrotfish. And when they want to tuck in and go to sleep at night, they need a way to protect themselves from predators. So what they do, I'm just going to draw a little sleepy parrotfish really quick up at the top. What they do is before they go to sleep, they use the mucus coating on the outside of their body, which a lot of fish, if you've ever touched a fish before, even if you've been like freshwater fishing, they're very slimy. Some parrotfish can make extra mucus, and they make a mucus cocoon around their body, like a big sleeping bag of snot. And that might sound a little gross, but what it's doing is it protects the parrotfish's smell from getting picked up by potential predators. And the parrotfish in the GOT will even do this. When I worked at the aquarium, one of my favorite things to do in the morning on the first shift was to go look for parrotfish mucus cocoons, because sometimes you see them floating, and they almost look like a jellyfish. But yeah, a little mucus cocoon. And again, these are the things where the add-ons that I'm doing is telling you a little bit of story about the animal and some information. And that's something that I only learned from either going to the aquarium and learning that from my job, or reading in books, or watching documentaries, or observing it in real life. So any questions in the wings?
We have a couple. So we have one from Siderica, I hope I said that right. Can you earn a living near Boston working as an artist? It seems like an expensive place to live.
So that's a really good question. So I mentioned that I worked at the aquarium for 8 years. I have over 15 years of informal education experience. For the longest time, I had either a full-time or a part-time job, and I did my art on the side. It wasn't until I was 34 that I've been freelance for 5 years that I was comfortable in my job as an illustrator and writer to stop working my education day job and become a full-time writer and illustrator. And that doesn't mean anything really. It's just what was comfortable for me. There's plenty of people out there who are working professional artists who are also teachers, who are, who wait tables. Like a lot of my job is as an illustrator and writer is volatile. I won't always know what the next project will be. And when I do books, I pitch a book. So I say, hey, publisher, would you like to make this book? And it's up to them to say yes or no. So for all the projects that you see, like if you go to my website and see what I've worked on, you're only seeing the things that I finished and were completed and that got the green light. There's a lot of other projects that never see the light of day because they just don't happen, because they don't, or they can't, or there's not the right time for them. So juggling how you become or how you decide to pursue being a artist is different for every person. And like I said about drawing, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Burnout is a real thing for artists, because the first book I ever worked on, it took me 4 years to draw it because I was working full-time as an educator. So I would come home from work and then work at night on weekends to make a comic. And it took me 4 years, but it's a hard juggle, and it is difficult in Boston because yes, it is expensive. But I really slowly eased into my career as a writer and artist. And again, that was what worked for me. I've had 3 big comic books, no, 4, sorry. I've had 4 books come out. I just had a new book come out 2 months ago about women in space. And I have 3 more books that I'm working on now. So with, I'm kind of, you would call it mid-career. With what I do, I'm comfortable that I've had a few projects come out and that I am in a place where I can have new projects, but it's a challenge. And who knows, like, I don't know what will happen after I finish those next books. Maybe there won't be. And I have lots of backup jobs that I can do if I can't do art. And I think that's an important thing to mention, is like having a wide skill set. I love education, and I also love working in food. I did that for a while as well. I baked pies for a while, and I worked on a farm. So it really just depends on the person and what you like. And I know that there are some artists who did art for a living, And for them, it was really hard to have their income and their financial security come from a job that they creatively loved, and it started to burn them out, and they didn't want to create art as much. So it really is a balance for every single person, and it's different for everyone. But I'm happy to candidly talk about that as well, because I do think it's worth mentioning, because it's one of the realities of what I do. Good question. Okay. Yeah. So next up, I saved the diva for last. I love Myrtle. She is the green sea turtle that lives in the giant ocean tank at the aquarium. She's been at the aquarium for since 1970. She is estimated to be 90 plus years old. She's 500 plus pounds of turtle power. And for generations of people, she's been kind of like the face of that tank. And part of it is because she's Myrtle. She's fantastic. So I have her name. She's a green sea turtle. Solonia mitis is her scientific name. And one of the cool things about, I didn't know this until I started working at the aquarium, is that sea turtles are up here in the summer. They are off the coast of Massachusetts eating. They migrate up here, so we have loggerheads, and I think we get greens. Did they come up this far north? I can't remember, but it was kind of eye opening for me to be like, oh my gosh, I actually thought they were just tropical. So for Myrtle, again, body shape. And I would describe not just necessarily as an oval, because she's a lot more three-dimensional than the three fish that we've drawn. So I would describe her as almost like a football or like a burger bun shape, because that starts to tell me that she's got more three-dimensionality. So in this case, I'm going to draw almost like a squished sphere. So she is just, yeah, I just really enjoy Myrtle. So to give this sphere dimensionality, I'm going to put my cross lines bent. And this will suggest a little bit that there's a squishiness happening there. So head shape. And I feel like for Myrtle, she's got a pretty decent sized head. And again, like we're going to be looking at her face. So let's get, she has kind of like another, I don't want to call it a hot dog shaped face, but it's kind of like a cylindrical tube. So I think of basically like a cylinder coming out of there. And I'm going to erase some of my guidelines. So kind of like, almost like an eraser. And we'll get that in there, and we'll come back to that in a later, but I want to talk about her fins. Sorry, not fins, flippers. She's not a fish. She's a reptile. It's like, sometimes I just, when I'm drawing and talking at the same time, it's a little bit, my brain goes a little foggy. So she has these kind of strong, kind of leaf shaped or maybe stretched rhombus, or almost like, I'm trying to think of what that shape would be in the front. And she almost has like, not fingers, but there's a ridge on there. Now, since we're drawing her kind of in 3/4, I'm going to just imagine that her other fin comes out on that side. Just because that's kind of where it would be if we're looking at like a toy of her. And her back flippers are a little shorter. Now, Myrtle does have a tail, but it's not a very long tail. With green sea turtles, the males have a longer tail in the back, and the females have a pretty small tail. So I'm not going to worry about tail for right now on her, although you might see tails on sea turtles if you're looking at photo references. I'm going to erase some of my lines there. And shell. And you know what? I think her shell tapers a little bit, so I'm just going to extend the back, make it a little pointy. And there's a kind of a ring that goes around, so I'll trace that outline. And I think, I won't get rid of that one yet. But Myrtle's shell is part of her body. Turtles can't take their shells on and off. So basically when you're seeing the back of her shell, that's her backbone and her ribs all fused together. And the front part of her shell is actually like her sternum and her ribs fused together. It's really cool. If you ever get to check out a turtle skeleton, it's like absolutely wild. And you start to understand that their shells are truly part of not just their body, but their skeleton. And then she has scutes that cover her shell. So for Myrtle, she has 5 scutes on top, and we're not going to be able to see them all. We'll do a top-down one too, but I'll just draw the lines for those, and this will actually help. They're shaped kind of like hexagons. So I drew one line, that line's the bottom, and I need for a hexagon 6 sides. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, and then that will be my 6, and the same one for that one. So 1, 2, connect up to there, 3, and this is a kind of a wonky hexagon because we're seeing it in 3 dimensions. And then from there, I just take those and I draw some guidelines to kind of go along. And the scutes on Myrtle are actually covering the bone, and they're made out of a material that's a lot like our fingernails. So it's I think is it chitin? This is where I'm like my information is not. I have to do a little bit more research. And just like anybody, whenever I'm talking about something, there's only so much that I know, but a lot of times I'm going back and I'm fact checking myself and making sure that the information I have about animals and about places is up to date, because there's actually a lot of stuff that changes. One of the cool things about science is that it's pretty dynamic. So I generally know about some animals, but at some points I like to go back and like redo my research and kind of just like keep myself updated. And you probably feel that way too. There's probably for young people in the audience, you might have learned about one thing in school one year, and then you have to like learn about it a couple years later, and you're like, oh, I remember learning about that, but it's like I don't have it all. So you'll go back and maybe look at your notes, or you'll have to read about it again. So mouth. Myrtle also has a beak. It's a little different than the parrotfish beak. I mean, they're very different animals, but she has a kind of like a pointy beak. So I'm going to do kind of like a V that's stretched out. And again, this is kind of like the front of her face right now. And we'll make her smile a little bit. She's also got a pretty good amount of extra skin. She can stretch her neck back and forth. So where her flippers meet her body and her head, there's some flexibility. So I like to kind of add that in. And then we'll give her some eyes. Hello, Myrtle. And in this case, I'm breaking my rule again. I've drawn her kind of in 3 dimensions, but you know what? I'm going to put both of her eyes on one side. And this is me doing a little cartooning. Now for patterning, greens have a lot of really cool, like, I don't know if they're also still scutes, but they have patterning on the front. So a lot of times to indicate this, I'll just do a couple little like trapezoids or circles to suggest that patterning on there. And I'll do that on that side. And I believe she has a couple of these covering her head as well. So I'll put a couple in there. Now, Myrtle gets fed a lot of things at the aquarium that you might actually have on your plate. And the reason for this is because normally in the wild, she'd be eating seaweed or seagrass or algae, and it would be too hard for us to bring that in to feed that to her. So instead, she gets lettuce and cabbage. But one of her favorites is also one of my favorites, and it's Brussels sprouts. So I'm going to draw her a little Brussels sprout, just because I feel like everybody needs a little treat every now and then. And some of you in the audience might fight me on this. You'd be like, Brussels sprouts on a treat. I'm like, if you cut them in half and put them in a tray really hot with oil and a little bit of salt and pepper and a little squeezed lemon juice, and just get them so they're a little charred, they're just, oh, they're so great. Anyways, but I also will draw another turtle food that you might find in the wild, and this is one of my favorites, is jellies. So we'll give her some jellies too. And it's interesting, lots of turtles eat jellies. Jellies have stinging cells, and the turtles don't mind. There must be something nice about the jellies that the turtles are like, you know what, it's worth it. I'm like, I don't know if I would still eat M&Ms if they stung me, but for turtles, I guess it's all right. And the last little bit that I'll do is I'll just do a side view, a front view of Myrtle, because we've been doing that with our animals. But if there's other questions, please feel free, and I can answer them while we are drawing. So let me scoot her down. There you go, Myrtle.
Great, yeah, we have a couple more. So Penelope asked, did you have any videos teaching you how to draw things?
Did I have any videos? So I mentioned a little bit that I'm in my 30s, so I actually had more books than videos. It was hard to find, like YouTube wasn't a thing when I was a kid, so how to draw videos didn't exist in that sense. But I had How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. I had some How to Draw Manga books. I'm trying to think if there's another one that kind of showed me how to draw that I had. I've actually got a lot of really cool like doodle books where it's just like it poses a question and then you have to answer it with doodles. But I will say, one of the things when I was a kid that I was most excited about that showed me the process of drawing is I had lots of Disney VHSs, and they still have this on like the DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff. They have like the bonus features, and they would show the animators behind the scenes, and they'd have like an animator being like, this is how I animate the scene, and they'd flip it up and show it. Or they do like a how to draw Mickey Mouse, or like how they did character designs for Ariel and the Little Mermaid. And again, these are all things that were cartoons when I was a kid. So I did look for stuff like that, but there's way more resources now. And if you have a favorite artist that makes a book or a comic, there's a good chance that either through them or through their publisher, they're doing live drawing right now. A lot of us, because we can't go do school visits like we normally do or go to events, we've started doing virtual drawing things. And I actually did something just like this today with you, except for space on Wednesday with the Smithsonian. So I would say if you're interested in how to draw videos, definitely look. But yeah, there's a lot more available to people who are interested in this. I did have art in elementary school. I think I had art once a week. I went to public school and they had cut art and music and a bunch of other extracurricular activities. It was a different time. It was the 80s. I could talk more about that later. But I had a really good art teacher in high school as well. And by that time, you could actually take I could sign up to take an art class for the whole semester. And those are some of the biggest guidance that I got on how to draw. So. Okie doke, thank you. Do I have time for one question?
Yep, so I think a good question to end with is from Ella, who wanted to know what made you want to be an artist?
Oh, Ella, what made me want to be an artist? I couldn't help it. Similar to the way that I love nature and I love being outside, I feel like it does, like I feel a pull to doing it. I just always found myself drawing. Whenever there's a piece of paper nearby, I just love to do it. And it's one of those things that, like, even if I had chosen a different career path and done something completely different, I know I would always be drawing because it's something that brings me great joy. And I will say that I'm doing it for my job. So there are days where I have like drawer's block and it's hard for me to draw, or where I'm frustrated and I can't get a scene right. But it's just something that no matter what, whether it was my job, and in a sense, the same way that I kind of say sometimes we're all scientists, we all have the ability to go and look and observe and ask questions. We're also all artists, whether you're an appreciator of the art or someone that enjoys facilitating art for other people, or just if you're someone who supports another person, whether it's a kid or a family member, to pursue art. I think that we all have the capability to be artists and to be scientists. And I think that that's part of just being human. But yeah, sometimes you just love something and you can't help it. I will say that going to places like the aquarium were really important to me as a kid and are just as important to me now. So if you can, it's difficult for everybody right now, but it's definitely difficult for institutions like the aquarium. So if you can, please donate. There's a Mission Forward Fund that will kind of help the aquarium do what they can do in the short term, just because what's short term is actually probably going to be how we're all doing stuff for a long time. And thank you so much to everybody who came out today. For the aquarium, for inviting me to do this. It's really special for me too, because I love it so much. And I only left the aquarium because I didn't have time to do both those jobs that I loved so much. So it's really nice for me to feel a connection to a place that I'm so fond of, and that helped me in my artistic path. So thank you so much. And if there's time, I could do another question, but that's okay. Sweet. I'll try and be short. I mean, I already am short. But.
All right. So I think the last one could be, what is your favorite film with sea creatures? That was from, oh my gosh, who was that from?
Oh my gosh. Oh, can I list
that was from Kara. Yeah. What's your favorite movie with sea creatures in it?
So my favorite right off the bat that I immediately came to my head was Ponyo, which is a animated film directed by Hayao Miyazaki. You might know My Neighbor Totoro or Spirited Away, but Ponyo is basically kind of a modern retelling kind of The Little Mermaid. But that movie is chock full of incredible, accurate sea creatures, not just current day, but like prehistoric critters and like inverts. I really love invertebrates, so animals that don't have a backbone or spinal cord. There's just, that movie is incredible. It's just such a treat to watch and to see them animated so affectionately. That might be my top one. I'm trying to think if there's another movie that I kind of like. It's like my comfort food or my blanket of ocean, but it's probably Ponyo. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a kid's movie. It's appropriate for kids and families. It's just, it's absolutely stunning. Okay, thanks again, everybody, so much for coming out to draw. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. And if you want to share your drawings, I'm at Mariss on Instagram and Twitter. You can check out my website for more resources and more information about my work. And yeah, I'd love to see your